Welcome to Backseat Directing.
We're your hosts,
Aaron,
and Andrew.
and today we're talking about our top 5 comic book movies.
Let's get into the show. Yep. All right. Points down. How do I make the keyboard go like that?
All right, so we each got our top 5 comic book movies, and it's only movies, not shows, and there has to be a comic book. Mine are all based on a comic book. Like there weren't a movie and then a comic book came out after the fact.
Yes, mine are all based on the comic book being first, inspired by a comic book. So when we brought this up, we left it in general terms, just pick your top 5 favorite movies, 5 favorite comic book movies.
And we
That's
did
all we
not,
know.
yeah, we did not rank them in order.
Yeah, that's all we know about each other's lists. So
Yeah, I don't know what's on yours.
we're gonna find out right now. So just to start with personal introductions, my name's Andrew. I love movies, comic books, TV shows, anime, video games, all kinds of stuff just in the realm of visual storytelling. I like a good story. I love things that are character driven. Um, you'll find out my top favorite movies, who my favorite characters are very soon, is going to be very obvious. Aaron, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Aaron, and I grew up watching movies too. Like every Friday night was movie night in my house, and we'd all kind of sit down and like focus on the movie and just kind of hang out with each other and stuff. So I grew up watching movies, and I've recently got into comic books, maybe like a year and a half ago, around the same time it seems like you did
Yeah,
too. You read a few as you were younger, it seemed,
a
but then
few.
you really got into it, and then you kind of got me into the comics.
And now it's just draining my wallet
Yeah,
at this point.
it's an expensive hobby, that's for sure. But outside of just like movies and shows, like I've played a little bit of video games and stuff too, but I really like creating things. I think I like kind of share it half and half. I like consuming, but I also like making things. Um, I'm a videographer for my day job, so I like analyzing different angles and storytelling and creating my own stories and scripts and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
you're really good with that stuff. I mean, if I think of you as anything, it's like a producer and content creator because you do so many different things. And like you draw art, you have it on the wall behind you,
yeah,
and you know, produce all different kinds of content and videos, pictures, and your own hand-drawn things, comic books, different stories, writing. So a lot of cool stuff.
all right, enough about us. Let's get into these movies. What do you got first on your list? Again, not your favorite, but what's the first one you're gonna bring up on your top 5?
So I can't not do this first. This has a very special place in my heart. And asking me to pick my top 5 favorite comic book movies, I've been thinking all week that it's like asking me to pick my favorite child. Like I have so many, like I have all these children out there, and I have to leave the rest of them out in the cold. But this one is like 1,000% guaranteed a spot, and it is The Dark Knight from 2008. This movie is like the movie that really made me love superheroes because, like you said, I grew up watching comic book movies. Um, I was I always grew up watching all kinds of movies, but I had all kinds of like Batman action figures, Spider-Man action figures, and this movie specifically and the game Batman Arkham City really made me fall in love with the character of Batman. It really made me fall in love with more serious movies, and comic book movies in general too. I think this movie really changed the way superhero movies are looked at and made. I mean, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies are absolutely phenomenal and they're, artistically made and they're great movies. But I think The Dark Knight has really like changed the landscape, and Christopher Nolan, the director, really changed the game for comic book movies
Yeah,
from
it
there moving
seemed to make
forward.
it more serious, and like this is an adult story too, you know.
Before we took the turn for like the dark Superman genre and all that, I think this was the movie that made superhero movies darker before it was all Brightburn and The Boys and all this stuff. This really like set the stage for those movies to actually have a platform.
Yeah. I knew that one was going to be on your list. Batman seems
It,
to really like shape your your whole like childhood and like how you grew up as a person.
It might be my favorite movie of all time. And like the character of Batman definitely has shaped my childhood. Like the way that I think in very moral terms, and I think that's probably in part because Batman is so like right and wrong, and it's
Mm.
like I think in those terms because I like you
You
grow up
are
like
pretty
you
black and
yeah,
white.
you want to be your hero. Like you
Yeah.
want to be like this person that you think is so cool. But I want to touch on too, since we're doing movies based on comics, um, people who created these characters. So Batman, created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger, one of the first superheroes ever. He debuted in Detective Comics. These people who created him deserve a lot of credit for all the media that we have now. So many great movies and comics, video games and stories that we all get to enjoy. So I think it's important to bring them up. And then Batman: The Long Halloween and Batman Year One. So Long Halloween by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, and Year
Yep.
One by Mazzucchelli and Frank Miller. Those stories definitely heavily influenced The Dark Knight, which you can see it in there. I mean, The Long Halloween. Have you read that one?
I have actually. I'm
It's
pretty sure
yeah.
read it on the plane.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, because yeah. So that movie or that comic kind of goes over Harvey Dent's evolution into Two-Face
Hmm.
and has a lot of mob ties in with the story, and that is obviously a huge part of The Dark Knight. We get Aaron Eckhart with an awesome, awesome performance as Two-Face, one of Batman's greatest villains, and they totally did him justice. I mean, and you can see that influence in the still early years of Batman. This is considered kind of year two of Batman in the Dark Knight. So you see the influence of year one in some of the scenes, like the scene where he calls. Oh no, when he calls the bats is in Batman Begins, but definitely when he picks the Joker card up at the end of the movie, at the end of Batman Begins,
Begins.
tilting us into the story of Batman the Dark Knight. There's just a lot of cool
Yeah,
references
that was
there.
in the Long Halloween. Is that what you're talking about?
That is in Batman Year One by Frank
That's right.
Miller.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
The Batman Long Halloween. That's the one that had a ton of his villains show up in that one, right?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
but it's a ton of his villains, but it really doesn't do a lot of attention to, doesn't do justice to all of them. I
Yeah,
think,
they all kind of just kind of peek in.
yeah, I'm not the hugest fan of the Long Halloween, to be honest. And I don't like the portrayal of the Riddler in it. I feel like he comes off not great, not
Yeah.
interesting at all. But going back to the movie, back to The Dark Knight. I love this movie so much. I love Christian Bale. He is amazing as Bruce Wayne and Batman. This movie did so much for the genre, like I talked about. It brought so many serious actors into the world of superheroes, which, I mean, not the first time it's been done, but is just so many of heavyweights. Like Morgan Freeman is in this movie, Michael Caine is in this movie, and obviously his relationship with Chris Nolan has him in all of his movies, but has a very like moving and emotional performance in this movie as Alfred. Like
Hmm.
Alfred wasn't always this integral figure. They've really developed him through the comics and the movies from more than just a butler. And this movie really, really highlights, along with the whole trilogy, the emotional relationship
Yeah.
between.
And you really see that emotional relationship in The Dark Knight Rises when, he's
I
talking.
cry when
Yeah,
he
when he's
leaves.
talking and he leaves him and he's all by himself. Yeah. I
It's
just rewatched that not that long ago.
such a like big influence that these movies have because I remember being in middle school and watching The Dark Knight Rises in theaters. I was in North Carolina visiting family, and we went to go see it. Um, and I was that was like one of the most excited I've ever been in my life because The Dark Knight being like possibly my favorite movie of all time, going to see the sequel to that, and there's just like so many good memories with all these movies. Like I
Yeah.
can't wait to talk about all of them and hear what yours are. But
Did you mention at all Christopher Nolan yet?
yes, I mentioned that he was the director of.
Yeah, yeah.
'Cause
But I don't
that's
think
my
I
guy.
don't think you
That's my
talked about him enough yet, because
not for how much I love him. I
yeah,
haven't talked about him
you
enough.
like just kind of brushed past
He
him.
doesn't know how to make a bad movie. I mean, he knows how to make a movie that's definitely too confusing, but it's still not a bad movie.
Right.
Um, I'm looking at you, Tenet. Tenet. You have to watch that movie. Is something else.
It's on the list.
But I mean, there's like a you can't go over this movie without talking about Heath Ledger.
Yeah.
Heath Ledger, like obviously, I think the most iconic live action Joker. Him and Mark Hamill doing the voice are just like chef's kiss, incredible, incredible Joker portrayals, and Heath Ledger is, like I said, hands down my favorite live action portrayal of the Joker, and
I agree.
he kills it in this movie. The writing is so good for his character. I
I
mean,
feel like even when another actor plays the Joker and it's good, it's still not good because he set the bar so high that it's like
yeah,
you can't touch it anymore, you know?
it's not even their fault.
Right.
It's not even that other actor's fault. It's I mean, everyone really is a big fan of Joaquin. I think
Hmm.
Joaquin Phoenix does a very good performance, but the time this movie came out, I was 9 years old. So Heath Ledger's going to be my Joker. That's just kind of the
Yeah.
way things work out,
Yeah.
time frame wise. How old were you in 2008?
I think I was 2 years older, so
Yeah.
11 or so. But I didn't watch it until it was out on like TV. I saw it the first time I saw it was like on TV on like cable. So like there was commercials and stuff. So like I don't even remember the first time that I watched it like all the way through, to be honest. Um, and I remember like as a kid or whatever, a teenager, as I'm watching this, I'm like, this is a good movie. But I don't think I realized at that time how good of a movie it was, because like I said, it was on TV, so I probably wasn't paying fully attention to it. And as a teenager or a young kid, like you're not fully grasping every aspect of the dialogue and what's going on and stuff. So I didn't have that like connection to my childhood as you do to this movie. But now, like watching it, I'm like, oh, this is a fantastic movie. Like definitely one of the best. However, I did not include this one in my top five.
I was curious, but hey, a little bit of differentiation, more for the.
I have it right here, and I have all the stuff for it and whatnot because it's like one of those that could have easily been in the top five based on my mood for that day.
Well, it's a movie that has to be talked about in the
Yeah,
top
for
five.
sure.
In my opinion, I was gonna start off by saying anybody who doesn't have this in their top five is wrong. Like I was gonna start off by saying, listen, top five lists are subjective. I'm not.
I knew you were
Yeah,
gonna say that.
I'm not saying that these movies are objectively the best five comic book movies. I know it's subjective to me, but at the same time as that, not having The Dark Knight is still wrong, 100% wrong. Like your opinion's valid, but it's wrong.
It's okay. I was already prepared for this.
You knew it.
And like I said, it's kind of like just at the time of me making the list, of like
Yeah.
what's really in that top five. Because I think an easier task would have been a top 10, you know? But
Yeah.
since it's a
More
top
room.
five, I was really trying to think of more so what do I have a connection
They
to?
should be ties to you.
You know?
Like, yeah, because we want to feel connected when we're talking.
Yeah.
Like this, talking about this movie means a lot to me.
Yeah.
Like someone's opinion of this movie means a lot to me. If you straight up don't like this movie, which I've never met someone who said that,
It's a fantastic movie. Don't get
confused.
it's definitely on my like top 10 all-time favorite movies,
Yeah.
which may not make sense if it's not on my top 5 comic book movies. But again, it's opinion based, right?
Yeah.
That's the fun of it. Um, has a IMDb rating 9 out of 10. It's
Lower than it deserves, which
it's
is a really high
really
score.
high. It's on the top 100 movies list for the IMDb. It had a budget of $185 million.
It grossed $1 billion.
Made $1 billion.
Well deserved billion. Honestly, should have been 2 billion. I think when I looked at it, it was 1 billion and 6 million. So it's on the low end of a billion, but movie crossing $1 billion is a
Yeah,
huge
it's
deal.
huge.
Huge, yeah.
And I wonder like if the same movie, right? Nothing's different about it, but it came out now. If it how it would do different with like social media and stuff. Because there's a lot more marketing and stuff that you see regularly. I wonder if it would have made more or less.
That's hard to say because this movie set the stage for the movies, like the R-rated movies that I know it's not
Sure,
R-rated,
sure.
it's PG-13, but this movie set the stage for the darker, serious movies that make good money now.
Yeah.
Like you can say if this movie
Like
never,
if this one didn't come out,
yeah,
the MCU and the DCU and all
would
that
there
stuff,
be like a
it wouldn't have
Logan?
worked.
Like would there be
Yeah.
like a serious dark Logan?
Yeah.
You know,
It wouldn't have worked.
if this movie came out before movies like Watchmen, would Watchmen have been more successful? Like stuff because this movie bridged the gap like between comic book movies being action movies and comic book movies being films, you know? Like Heath Ledger was like posthumously awarded an Oscar for his performance in this movie.
Yeah.
An Oscar for comic book movies don't happen.
Yeah.
And like he did that. Like it's impressive.
So I want to go ahead and say one of mine from my list, sticking on the theme, the Batman. Came out this year. Has a rating on IMDb of 7.9 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 85 for the critics and an 87 for the audience. So pretty well received on both aspects, which doesn't really seem to happen. Um,
So why, personally to you, is this movie in your top five?
I really enjoy when films are grounded in reality, and they're like when I'm watching, I'm like, yeah, that could be possible, like I could see that actually happening. And the scene that really pops out in my head of like, oh yeah, I can see that. So when he is in the police station and he's talking to Gordon, and then he's like, "You gotta go, punch me," kind of thing. He hits him and then runs out, and then he gets to the top of the building, and you can see like the fear on Batman's face of like, "Oh shoot, I gotta jump off this building." These policemen are coming after me, and you can tell like it was like one of his first times, if not his first time ever trying this. And he jumps out and he had like the actual wingsuit that skydivers actually use, which I thought was pretty cool. I think it'd be cool if they merge that into his cape for the second movie, if they do the second movie or whatever. But it was cool to see him fly that with fear and then also not stick the landing. I thought that was a really cool aspect of it. But I really like it when it's like, yeah, that's possible. All the physics seem to line up, in the moment. I mean, sure, if we watch it back and whatnot, you can see things and you're like, ah. But like that first initial feeling, the whole time I was watching, I was invested in the detective side of the story rather than just the movie going like big blows, big explosions, CGI this, CGI that, which is cool, but this one kind of captured my like what's gonna happen attention. You
Yeah.
know, I really liked the dark aspect of it. I liked the cinematography a lot. I liked the I think he used like an old 35 millimeter lens and stuff, and they had really cool bokeh and all this stuff, which is just like when the background and the foreground's like really blurry, and the subject's in focus and stuff. And it was like when the in the very beginning that tool that falls, and it
Yeah.
falls into place, and then later they have that
Carpet
same
tool.
yeah they have that same camera angle where that tool was, and then it's like in focus. Batman walks up to it and it's like, oh, there's something there.
So while we're talking about cinematography, I want to mention the director of this movie is Matt Reeves, and the cinematographer is Greg Fraser. Both hugely talented at what they do, um, and just making more and more amazing content. I mean, Greg Fraser is working on Dune. Matt Reeves has another project coming up. I don't know the title off the top of my head, but they are going to just continue to shoot up from here because of how successful that movie was.
Yeah.
I can pull the cord on saying that this movie is also in my top five. Um, so, I mean, I've loved Batman since I was a little kid, and I've always loved the detective aspect of Batman too. And I wanted them to make a movie where Batman chases a serial killer. And I had in my mind when this movie was announced, Victor Zsasz, who is in the comics a serial killer. And they went with the Riddler, and I was hoping they would still do this angle. And I really think that they pulled it off really well. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Paul Dano is a really incredible actor. I really like him in Prisoners, and I
Yeah.
think he does a really good job in this movie as the Riddler. They they just did the detail because I love the movie Seven, and I love David Fincher movies like this dark,
We just watched this not
brainy.
that long
Yeah,
ago. Yeah.
that's like one of my top movies, top 20 for sure. And I really like that dark, rainy detective story, and they did that in a Batman film. So they just married two things that
Yeah.
I love, and they did it so beautifully. I mean, the rainy, dark atmosphere, like so many shots of this movie are in the dark, in the rain,
Yeah.
and you just have that feeling like it being in the rain
I
in the
feel like that
house.
was a complaint of some people is that the movie was like so dark, like you could not really see what was going on. I love that aspect of it, because again, it makes it feel more grounded. And like he's working at night and stuff, and if you're paying attention, you see the things that the director wants you to see. Like they shot it that way for a purpose.
I would find it so hard to argue that that movie isn't like beautifully shot.
Yeah.
Like saying it's too dark is like uh, if that's an insult to the lighting and the cinematography of the movie, I just don't understand it because the movie is so visually pleasing and visually stimulating.
Yeah.
I can think of so many shots off the top of my head where I was like, "That's neat that they did that," or just completely entranced because of
Also, throughout the entire movie, I was falling more and more in love with his suit. I think it's the best live action Batman suit that we've seen, in my opinion. Um, I just thought it looked so cool. It looked like it was handmade. It looked like it had a lot of practical military implements put into it. Um, and then I also liked at the end that end fight where he's again made to seem like he's human. Like he's getting the crap beat out of him, and then he takes that shot of adrenaline and then just
Yeah.
loses it,
Yeah.
and then
Oh.
like he's so hyped up that he just keeps bam, 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 like I love that he needed to do that and that he just wasn't like brushing off these hits and that shotgun blast like it was nothing. I like that they made him seem like he's still a human. Um,
There's an emotionality to that too. I mean, the screaming and he's shouting at other points in the movie when he's fighting. If somebody's punching you in the face, realistically, you're gonna be angry. Like we don't like we
right.
see so many like I don't want to say cheesy, but we see so many action scenes where they're just shaking off stabs and bullet wounds and like people are gonna react to that. That the acting while you fight is part of the acting, it's not just the dialogue. So like the
Yeah.
physical acting, I think the action sequences are really well done in that movie.
Yeah. I thought that was great.
I wanted to talk about the score in this movie. So I'm gonna reference back The Dark Knight. So you're not coming directly off of The Dark Knight because there's obviously a whole other series of appearances for Batman, but The Dark Knight is the movie that I will immediately compare everything to, like you talked about with the
Yeah.
Joker.
I
So
mean,
when
Ben Affleck, the other Batman that you were talking about, like
yeah,
he hasn't had his own movie yet either.
so that's a big factor
You know,
too. I mean, he's got he has a specific score in his movie, but it's different.
Yeah.
So in my head, I'm comparing everything to The Dark Knight, one of
Yeah.
my favorite movies of all time. So which is unfair, admittedly unfair, but I can't help it. So when this movie comes out, um, you're going to compare the score, which Hans Zimmer wrote a masterpiece of a score when he wrote the Batman score for The Dark Knight.
Definitely. I remember I don't know how old I was, 13 or whatever, and I was making like this little movie actually with my sisters, and I was filming it on my iPod 4, and it was like this little action movie or whatnot, kind of based off the movie Click, where I had a remote and I could like pause things and rewind things with.
That's awesome.
And I used the music from The Dark Knight in that.
Yeah. That's how early on it was like captured you.
It was like, so it had this epic music and probably this very, 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 very subpar acting,
Many
screenwriting.
varies was that? It's like
Very.
many varies.
And obviously it was shot on a little iPhone, so the music definitely surpassed
This is not fitting.
everything else.
Hans was like, okay.
I really wish
see you.
I really wish I could find that because I don't think I have it anymore anywhere. But anyways, I really like the score on The Dark Knight as well.
So one thing that they did and I believe this started with Batman Begins, was they had James Newton Howard, another legendary composer, come on board and he wrote the score for Bruce Wayne. And Hans Zimmer wrote the scores for Batman. And so you have these two, the dichotomy of these two personalities with the music being written by two totally different people. So it has the feeling of being from different worlds, which
Yeah.
I think was really, really brilliant, really genius.
Yeah.
And then cut to all this time down the line, now we're watching the Batman, and you're like, wow, they masterfully created
14
this
years
beautiful
later.
score 14 years ago. Is something that's in my head from when I'm 9 years old, playing on. I mean, I'm literally even into adulthood, going into job interviews, I'm watching the end scene of The Dark Knight with the Gary Oldman speech as Commissioner Gordon saying he's the Dark Knight, and then Hans score pops in like, dun, 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 and
And you're just right in the car, like, let's go!
way too. They're like, we didn't need that energy in this job interview, sir. I mean, please, why are you bench pressing? But that is.
You come into the job interview through the ceiling, just
I'm repelling in a bat suit. But that's how much I love the score and the like emotionality I have connected to it. And Michael Giacchino comes in and does the score for the Batman, like you said, 14 years later, and somehow it feels like he rivaled that magic that they struck before. It was really good.
So I based this list again off of the feeling that I had when I first watched it, and I think that's why The Dark Knight isn't on this list. But for this one, we went and watched it. Came home. I was all pumped in the car driving back, because it was a 45-minute drive. And then I got home and I remember I first told Brooke, my wife, I was like, she's like, how was the movie? And I was like, it was all right. Like I was digesting it,
Yeah.
like I didn't know how to articulate
You
it
don't
yet.
want to say too soon, because you
Yeah,
don't want to seem like a
exactly.
poser
I
later.
wanted it to marinate. But as soon as I got home, I put on Batman's song from that movie and just listened to it around the house as
Oh,
I was getting ready for bed. And I was like, that song is so awesome. And then the next day when I would go and work out, I was like humming that song in my head as I was getting warming up for my workout and stuff. It's like, ah,
it feels
it
like it
just hits.
swells up. It feels like it
Yeah,
plays from like inside you
yeah,
outward. Like
it's
it's
great.
so, so good. Yeah, it's incredible. And you really feel just it's I would say the feeling encapsulated by that. Before we started recording, we were talking about what what the music in a movie, how it can encapsulate a feeling. And
This one
I
definitely
feel like
does.
that encapsulate I feel like it sounds ominous. Like it just
Yeah,
sounds foreboding.
yeah.
And like,
Which is definitely his
yeah,
kind
right.
of character,
Yeah.
especially in the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
Um,
Now, the one thing I want to talk about this movie is I have a critique for it because I am a negative person and I have to say bad things about things. Um,
what you
but
got?
I think a very important thing that I think could have made this movie a lot better, and I'm just, coming from a viewer's perspective, I don't think I could have made a better movie, but I think they could have ended it probably 15, I'd say 10 to 20 minutes earlier. I think if they ended that film, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen it, if they ended that film on the rooftop scene where he's holding the kid's hand and the kid grips his hand and the helicopter pulls him up and he lets go, I think ending the movie there would have been beautiful. Not only is it an incredible shot, but it's the perfect end cap for this man's journey. You watched him in the beginning come as a symbol of fear. In the beginning, he protects this guy in the subway and walks up to him, but the innocent person he's protecting is afraid of him.
Yeah,
He's scared of his, I mean, someone who would otherwise be his hero. And because he's this ominous, foreboding figure, this menacing creature of the night. And we see him come full circle to where a child isn't afraid of him, and a child holds onto his hand as a symbol of hope. And the child looks up to him and sees through that child's eyes a symbol of hope and a person who has taken that journey from beginning to end. I think that is the perfect end cap for the movie that perfectly encapsulates his character journey, his arc, and what he's been through. And he's going to go on to be that person moving forward. But instead, we get an extra 15 minutes with uh, they kind of push a Joker cameo on us, and then we have a scene in the cemetery with him and Catwoman, which I guess if they ended it earlier, maybe it seems like they're not
wrapping
really
up there.
wrapping up their relationship,
Yeah.
the arc of their relationship. But I just
I
wish
think
they
the
had
Joker
found a
scene
way.
wasn't necessary.
Yeah,
I think we could be teased for that without even having it in
yeah,
the movie, because like Joker is such a big part of the Batman. Like we're already being teased with it not being in the movie
yeah,
as it is. But as a director myself on some projects and someone who films and edits things, projects and whatnot, it's really hard to have all of this footage, and all of this story and to condense it down into something that you have to fit within your timeline.
yeah,
Like we just worked on a project and we had 14 hours worth of footage, and I had to bring that down and condense it down into 3 hours of edited footage. And it's really hard to take out certain things because you're like, man, like this is really cool, or you feel like it's important to the story as the director, but then at the same time, it's like, well, something's got to go.
yeah,
So like I can see how it's like hard to
yeah,
like you talked about like babies, like all these movies are your babies or whatever. Like, all right, now you have to get rid of
yeah.
three of them.
Three of your
You have
babies.
to.
This
Like
well,
it's kind of like
also
that.
some movies nowadays have as much as 1,000, even 2,000 hours of pure footage that they're going through to
Yeah,
decide what makes the final cut for the movie.
it's
So
insane.
yeah, it's
It's crazy
hard.
how they're able to narrow it all down and find something cohesive that looks, sounds, and feels good. Last part on the Batman, and then we'll move on. We've talked a lot about the Batman so far.
It's the Batman podcast now.
That's right.
We should change the name.
It had a budget of 185 million, and it made 770 million.
And also, that means less screenings. They can't fit as many screenings into a day, which means less tickets, less money. So, but moving on to the next movie, I will pick up my next movie on my list is V for Vendetta. V for Vendetta came out 2006, R-rated movie, 2 hours and 12 minutes long. So it's based on a comic book by the same name, written by Alan Moore and illustrated by David Lloyd. The director is James McTeague, and this movie is phenomenal. I mean, one of the best adaptations from comic to film. Have you seen it?
I have. I
So
watched it with you at
we,
your house.
memory is not so good.
Yeah.
So it's right here. Yeah,
You were too focused on the movie.
we watched it on the anniversary.
Who you
No,
were
we,
watching.
we
Yeah,
watched it
that's
on
right.
we watched it on November 5th.
That's right.
So remember the 5th of November. This movie has so many iconic lines, so many iconic scenes. It looks great. It's I'm not gonna say it's page for page out of the comic, but it's a very, very faithful.
Did you finish the comic?
I did not fully finish the comic. Don't come after me. Alan Moore is sometimes a little dense, but the comic's interesting. I think the movie supersedes the comic. I think the movie improved upon the comic, but I don't know if that's a hot take or not.
When did the
But
comic come out? Do you have that written down anywhere?
no, I don't.
I have that on here.
But while you look
It was
for
a
that,
while ago, right?
yeah, while you look for that, I'll keep talking about it.
Okay.
So, this movie has Hugo Weaving as a star, and Hugo Weaving is such an incredible actor. I mean, he really disappears into the roles he steps into. I love him in The Matrix. I mean, I love him as the Red Skull. He's almost unidentifiable sometimes. I mean, it's the Red Skull. The artistry helps, the makeup, and then his face is covered by a mask this whole movie in V for Vendetta. But he just encapsulates these roles really in a really special way, and he's a big part of what makes this movie great. The Wachowski siblings wrote this movie, and I think they did a really good job with the adaptation.
It came out 1982 through 1989.
82, 7 years.
Yeah.
It's a pretty long run for this movie. I have an
Not movie for the comic.
oh yeah, well, misspoke. Pretty long.
You idiot.
That's a long run for this comic in particular because
Yeah.
this reads as like a graphic novel
Right.
where nowadays I think it definitely
Transforming, yeah,
this amount of story could have easily been completed in a year or two.
Yeah.
But this movie,
Also now, like, kind of going to comic books, I'd imagine they're a lot easier to make nowadays.
yeah, with all the
A lot
digital,
more digital
yeah.
and all that stuff. I'd imagine putting together a comic book this size, way back then, you know.
If you had no idea, what year that comic was from and you picked it up, you can obviously tell the difference in that it's hand drawn.
Yeah. Which hand drawn comics are still hand drawn, but there's a lot
Penciled?
more.
As a,
Yeah, right. Like pen to paper,
Yeah.
rather than digitally drawn on an iPad.
because there's still a penciler.
Yeah,
even
right.
if
There's
they're
still
doing
an
it
artist drawing this stuff, but there's different like lighting effects that you can do with an iPad or these other tablets that these artists are mostly now drawing on for comics.
For people that don't know that much about comics, there's usually different people fulfilling a lot of roles to make it come together. There's going to be an author leading the story. There's going to be a penciler who is doing the main bulk of the drawing, and then there's going to be an inker who's filling in the drawing, shading it, coloring it.
Yeah, they do the black and white values. So they basically take a pen with ink, and draw all the outlines, kind of like if you were to get a coloring book.
Yeah.
They would draw all those lines.
Sometimes these roles overlap, but it's just so much more time.
But then they have a
Appropriate.
colorist. Sometimes they split the color into just flats and then like the actual like highlights and shadows and stuff. Because flats would just be the basic color, like your shirt or your jacket's purple, so they would just color that whole thing purple, and then either someone else or that same artist will go in and draw all the shadows in different values on it. So there's a lot that goes into comic books.
But this comic to movie adaptation is really well done, and it's something that's hard to do and not a lot of studios get right, converting a comic into a movie. And this one is amazing. It just has, like I said, so many quotable moments. And it really has values that make you think, and dark real world concepts, which, I mean, financially, this movie, I don't know if it would be considered a success. It has a budget of $54 million with a worldwide all-time gross of $132 million. That's after you count in, marketing, which usually isn't done in the figures for a budget. Um, Normally, marketing is another, 10, 20, even more $1 million. So I doubt 132 million was anything near the
When
number
did
they
the
wanted
movie
to
come out?
see. So it came out in 2006. So I doubt this is anything near what they wanted to see for the
Yeah.
worldwide gross. But I think that it has success in its own terms. I think that it's a really well received movie. Would you look up the rating for me?
Yeah.
So the this movie, I I, I think it's well received by the public. I want to say its score might be in the sevens, but this
IMDb 8.2 out of 10.
which is a really good score.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, this I think that this movie is just really great. Like it makes you think. The concept in the movie is that the world is being run by this totalitarian regime because of the fact that there was a disease that ravaged the world, and so the government had to take control and institute martial law, and now the government just has this death grip on society where you really don't have much freedom. And it's the scary concept that could happen and does happen in places in the world. And it makes us think about our freedoms, and it makes us think about the other side of the coin. I mean, there are times when revolutionaries are viewed as heroes, and there are times where revolutionaries are viewed as villains. And this movie points out that, you know, you can call a revolutionary a terrorist, like people do to V in this film, but V from his perspective and from other perspectives, from an audience perspective, is a hero.
Mhm.
So it really makes you think about like these gray concepts. And even in small moments, there's a scene I always think about where he's basically seeking out personal vengeance. So V for Vendetta. And spoilers for those that haven't seen the movie. He comes to this woman's house who did medical experiments at Lark Hill where he was a patient, an unwilling patient. And he comes to her house, and she is a good person. I mean, as good as a person can be, having done the things that she's done. She believes she was doing something for the overall good of mankind. She believes she was helping people doing research, but she was involved and implicit in doing these horrible things to these unwilling patients. And he comes to her, and he knows that on a level she's a good person. And talking to her, he isn't hateful towards her, but he speaks to her in a manner that I find very interesting. She says that she says essentially it's not what I meant to do, and he says I haven't come for the things you've meant to do. I've come for the things you have done, and that line just always kind of hits me. And he kills her, and it's this person that they do a good job of making you sympathetic towards in the film, and he still kills her.
Mhm.
So I think it does a good job of a lot of things. It makes V not a simple character. In a simpler movie, he would have punished her less intensely, but she paid with her life because this movie is about a gray character, a morally gray character.
This is a movie that I would like to watch again because it is like kind of hard to follow your first time around a little bit.
I agree.
Because it's an in-depth story and it kind of goes back and forth a lot. So
It can be
it's
slow, so
yeah, it's interesting. I would like to watch it again
I
at
just
some
think the
time.
dialogue in
Maybe
this
on
movie,
November 5th we can
yeah, it's
watch it
coming
again
coming back around.
once a year.
I think the dialogue in this movie is so crisp and so smart and sometimes so fast. When he's doing the alliterative reading at the beginning of the movie, he is just firing.
Yeah.
It's blink and you miss it kind of dialogue, and
It almost
sucks
reminds
me
me
in.
of Jack Sparrow, kind of the way he talks. Like you have to like kind of pay attention to what he's saying, or you're gonna miss what he actually
The
meant.
violently voracious,
Yeah.
Muslim volitions. Yeah, I mean he's good with his words. But here,
All right.
let's go on
So
to your next movie.
my next
Before we go
one.
on to your next movie, I actually have a trivia fact I want to get off.
Okay.
Let me interrupt you. So there's a scene in the movie with the dominoes. Do you remember it? There's a giant, giant set of dominoes.
Yeah, of
So
course.
it's 22,000 dominoes. It took four professional domino assemblers 200 hours to set up. I don't know how you get the title of professional domino assembler, but I assume you're good at what you do.
Oh my
And it
gosh.
took them 200 hours. You imagine messing up this shot, like from a production perspective. This is, I think that
Jeez.
it's a really cool shot, worth it for the movie. But such a grand scale. 22,000 dominoes. But that's what I wanted
Wow,
to say.
that's crazy. Man, you can be like a professional at anything. That's crazy. All right. So my second movie on my list here, again, not in any particular order, is Captain America Winter Soldier. I remember going to the theater and watching this and just being blown away. Like again, it felt pretty grounded. It was kind of like a spy and espionage. How you say that word?
Espionage.
Espionage.
I knew this was gonna be on your list. Good
Yeah,
choice. Good
I
choice.
I love this movie. Um, like I liked how grounded it was, and uh, yeah, it was great. Chris Evans is awesome. Obviously, it has a 7.8 out of 10 on the IMDb. Rotten Tomatoes, critic score 90%, audience score 92. So pretty well received all the way around. That was my microphone. No big deal.
That movie has one of the best all-time fight scenes, and you don't even have to say it's so good that I don't have to say what scene it is, and everybody would already be thinking,
They better
yes,
be
it's the
thinking.
fight scene with Captain America and the Winter Soldier when they come off the bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like too how emotional it was, because it's not just another bad guy.
yeah.
It's his best friend that he
That's
hasn't
when he
seen
realizes it. Yeah,
in forever, and like he didn't even know that he was alive. Um, and I try not to watch a bunch of trailers beforehand when I watch movies because I kind of want to. I want to be surprised. I want the movie to tell me what's going on.
yeah.
And
Especially with Marvel nowadays, you got
yeah,
to.
and one of my friends told me, he's like, you know who the Winter Soldier is? And I didn't at that time because at that time I wasn't into comics or anything. And I was like, not really. And he was like, oh, it was in the trailer. It was Bucky. And I was like,
Why would that? Is that really in the trailer? Because I don't remember the trailer for
I
this
don't,
movie.
that's what he told me that it
Wow.
was. And I was like, did you just tell me that? Like, man, I wish I had that first realization at the same time that Steve Rogers had the
Yeah,
realization that that
yeah.
was Bucky.
I mean,
But either way,
yeah.
I really like the aspect of it being like his friend.
I
You
knew
know?
because I watched it's in Avengers Earth Mightiest Heroes, I believe is what I saw it in. So I had already watched that show when I was younger, and I knew that he was going to come back as
Yeah.
that he was going to come back as the Winter Soldier. I knew it from somewhere, but the one I always wish that I got to see for the first time and not in the trailer in the movie is Hulk's appearance in Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah.
I wish so badly
That
that
would have
wasn't
been
in the
cool.
trailer because that would have blown my mind.
Yeah. That would have been cool. Um, this one had a budget of 170 million and box office 714.4 million. So pretty good showing for Marvel. Came out in 2014.
Now, this should have been the first Marvel property that the Russo brothers directed.
It is
And I mean, so this movie sets a course for so much to come because they're then going
yeah.
to direct Infinity War, they're going to direct
Civil
Endgame,
War.
Civil War. I mean, those are three of the greatest Marvel movies ever made.
Those four are like some of the best movies that like financially that
Yeah,
Marvel has. So they have a very strong presence in the MCU.
it started here. Yeah, I mean, the tone of this movie is beautiful. I love when I'm glad that new Marvel projects are kind of taking this route of like a thematic element, and I feel like there's a theme in Winter Soldier of like a spy movie,
Yes.
and it's so cool
That's
when
kind of like why I like spy stuff and like in the
yeah,
Batman like detective stuff. Like I
yeah.
like the mystery of things and like sneaking
I
around and
love a good
stuff
stealth mission when they take
like
the ship in the beginning of
yeah.
Winter Soldier. So it's just
Yeah.
so good.
And then even like an Avenger, because in the first Captain America, you didn't really get to see much of that, and I didn't. I mean, it's a good movie, but it's not like great. I mean, he spent a lot of time obviously like becoming Captain America, and then once he was Captain America, he was kind of just a joke or whatever, and like that's fine if that's his story arc. But in the Avengers, you kind of got to see that sneaky aspect of it a little bit when he was going through Shield's like paperwork and stuff and figuring out what their true mission was or whatever when he presented it to Nick Fury. And it's like you got that little taste, and I'm glad that they took that and made that the theme of the next movie. And then this is obviously the first introduction of Falcon,
Yeah.
who plays a big part in Captain America and his story and character arc as well. And
especially now,
yeah,
being the new Captain
right.
America.
Spoilers. Um,
Oh,
but like it's cool because it's like the very start of a new friendship, and then also like I don't know, it's not rekindling, but like the reunion of two best friends, but it's not the kind of reunion that you would typically see. Obviously, he's brainwashed and has been killing a bunch of people. Like if one day I haven't, or if I haven't seen you in 10 years, and then I found out that you're the person that I've been chasing for a decade that's been killing hundreds of people. Like
not the happiest reunion.
yeah, like I wonder how I would react to that. Like
I
would I
mean,
just see the all the bad stuff, or would I just see the stuff that I know?
Cap takes
Because
it
if I
really
didn't
well.
if I didn't know you at all, I'd think, what piece of garbage,
If you want to be like Captain America, you forgive me pretty instantly.
Yeah, he did. But yeah, I mean, he always stuck up for him when he was getting beat up and all that stuff. So like in a way, he was
It evens it out
he
for all
was
the murder.
yeah, no, in a way, like Bucky was his hero
Yeah.
growing up.
So then he gets a chance to have his back too. But I
Yeah,
mean, we know that it's not really Bucky's fault too. That
yeah,
it was
right.
under the influence of the old mind
But
control.
as you said, it's not about your intentions; it's about what you did. Got him. All right, let's hear your next movie.
All right, so my next one is Watchmen, which
We have right here too.
I came to pick all the artsy superhero movies to make myself look cool. I love this movie. It's another Alan Moore work. This time with Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons is on art. Uh, this movie I also think far improves upon the comic. I saw the movies to both this and V for Vendetta before I read the comics. Maybe that plays a factor, but I think this movie is definitely better than the comic to me. I
Did you
think
finish this comic?
yes.
So I started this one and didn't make it very far.
They're both. I mean, it's a style. They're older comics, so it's different. But Zack Snyder directs this movie, and I'll go to my grave saying that Zack Snyder uh, is brilliant at adapting source material. I mean, this movie and 300 as well. He has direct source material to work from, and he takes this right off the page. This is more accurate than anything I've seen to a comic, page for page, like so well done and put into a movie in a way that still has his own stylistic tone on it. Because these are, I don't know if they'd be considered a classic age comic, but they're definitely older comics, 80s,
Mm-hmm.
and they use that kind of color palette with these kind of lighter colors. And then the movie has these darker tones because it's a serious superhero movie. And the the darker tones that they use, they changed it visually, but he still made it look so beautiful. I mean, the shots of Dr. Manhattan when he's on Mars are amazing. All across the movie is entertaining to watch, and they get these beautiful shots. Zack Snyder's famous slow motion, the smiley face pin falling down off the side of the building as the comedian gets kicked out. That's not a spoiler. That's in like the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, I haven't seen this movie.
Oh my gosh, you would love this movie. So it's R
I was
rated.
hoping to watch it after I read the comic,
Yeah.
but I started reading the comic and it just didn't hold my attention. It had a lot of words, and that's why I read comics, because they don't have a
A
lot
lot
of
of
words.
fair. That's fair enough. But the movie it can be slow at parts, but it keeps me in it the whole time. That's all I care about. If a movie's slow, I really don't care, as long as it doesn't make me feel that it's
You
slow.
have the box office numbers for it?
Yes, this movie also I think is criminally underrated with a budget of $130 million and a worldwide gross of $185 million. So
Wow,
this movie
that's really close.
might almost be a loss for the studio that
Yeah.
produced it, which is unfortunate. But I mean, once you put in marketing, it's probably got to be another $30 million for this movie. That's not looking good for the financial success.
Yeah.
But I think, such a masterwork of the comic to film genre. I mean, you have like these great actors. I mean, Jackie Earle Haley as Rorschach, Patrick Wilson. You've got Malin Ackerman, Billy Crudup. I hope I'm pronouncing that last name right. Jeffrey Dean Morgan as the comedian. perfect casting. Jeffrey D. Morgan's great in everything he's in, and Matthew Good as Ozymandias. So, I mean, these are all great actors, and the writing is amazing, and it looks beautiful. This movie, I don't know how it wasn't a success. A lot of people will attribute it to the time period it came out in, 2009, that the world wasn't quite ready for the R-rated superhero movies in 2009. Like we were saying that The Dark Knight kind of primed the landscape for these R-rated movies that were later successful, like Deadpool, Logan,
Mm.
and then like R-rated like The Boys. That's obviously very successful. Invincible.
Suicide Squad? Was that wrong?
I think it's PG-13. But Watchmen, I guess maybe the world wasn't ready for it. But
Yeah.
I mean, we have other R-rated superhero movies like Blade. I don't know how Blade did financially, but I imagine pretty well. They made 3 of them.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, Watchmen is long and artsy. So I say artsy very loosely. I mean, it's made very aesthetically.
Yeah.
It's very serious tones in the plot and thematically. You're dealing with just like these morally gray, dark characters once again. Like Rorschach is, sexist, racist. He's uh, a main character in this movie, the main character, arguably like the
Yeah.
star. So it can be hard to sell that to mainstream audiences. It can be hard to sell tickets for a superhero movie um, to adults, especially if it's not marketed the right way. I mean, this is 2009 is the year after Iron Man came out, so it's not,
It's also the year after
yeah,
Dark Knight.
The Dark Knight. Yeah, so well, they haven't boomed yet. The MCU hasn't boomed yet.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the superhero movie craze phenomenon that has now become its own whole category of film. You've got like romance, drama, superheroes. Wasn't quite there yet.
Yeah.
But I mean, going back and watching it now, I've seen this movie a bunch of times and it holds up amazing. I mean, it's a really incredible movie and it's emotional to watch it. I mean, there's when you're dealing with Dr. Manhattan as a character, he's so interesting. I mean, it's the idea of if you become a god and you have the ability to have so much power, what does your human life now mean to you? What does a day mean to you in the scale of potentially being immortal? What does a fragile human who you once loved mean to you as you age and or as they age and you
Yeah.
don't?
Invincible kind of plays with that concept.
Yeah.
Moving on to my third on my list.
Excited. What you got?
Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
It's a
I
good pick.
loved this movie. Are you laughing?
Wish I had thought of that pick.
Do you not think this is worthy of top 5?
I have it in my top 5 also.
You do?
Yes.
um, I thought you were like laughing at me like it shouldn't be there, and I was about to fight you.
So we have another matching one. That's why I was laughing.
I wasn't trying to match you, but I didn't know a lot about this movie going into it. So like I didn't have any expectations or anything, and like from the trailer and stuff, I didn't really understand like what the plot was about necessarily. I just thought it looked cool, like being an artist.
Well, the weirdest thing
and the animation and stuff from it.
The weirdest thing to me is watching the trailer for the first time. I remember being in a theater when I lived in Orlando. I was like, "Oh, this doesn't look good. I don't like this art style," which
Yeah.
is so weird to me because now, like after having seen it,
Part
I
of what
love
makes it so good.
Oh, it's 1,000%. It's one of the main reasons it's so
Yeah.
good. The animation is so good and because it's unique. But I was like, I don't know if I like that. But now having like actually seen it, I don't know what I was thinking.
Yeah, like-
because it's so good.
Like I said, I didn't know much about this movie going in
Yeah.
to it, and
He's a relatively new character.
Yeah.
Especially compared to people
Spider-Man
like
and
Superman,
stuff, yeah.
Spider-Man.
But when I watched it, I just watched it at home. I didn't go to the theaters to watch it. Did you watch it in theaters?
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't, and I was just like, all right, we're gonna put on this movie. It's Friday night or whatever, like. And it had my attention the whole time. And I remember just feeling like when it was over, oh my God, that was amazing. And like the animation was so cool. Like it felt like you were reading a comic book,
Yeah.
but you were watching a movie. And that was such a cool like adaptation of it. And this was before either of us were into like comic books and actually reading them. So it was cool that I got that sense without actually ever reading a comic book before. So it really like made you feel like the origins of where this character first came out and what medium it was released in first.
This
Um,
movie, it just wins on all fronts to me.
yeah,
It wins. It's, amazingly written, beautifully animated. The voice acting's incredible.
yeah.
The story is emotional, holds you in the whole time. It's,
The villains were
close to
great.
just the villains. All the characters are great. And there's a
Yeah.
huge cast, and I feel like almost, I don't
Every
know.
character was developed,
Yeah, they
and
moved
there
so
was
many
no
people.
like annoying characters or anything, like it.
Even they made Spider-Ham work.
Yeah,
Like they pulled that off.
I know. I'm like,
He's awesome.
Spider-Ham's
He's
not
funny.
necessarily my favorite, but like I didn't mind him being in the movie, and I think that's part of like what is he doing? When you're watching the
Yeah,
trailer, it's like, what
yeah.
is this?
I love
This
that it's
seems
John
goofy.
Mulaney. John
Yeah,
Mulaney is a great stand-up comedian. I love him as Spider-Ham.
yeah,
And they also got Nick Cage. But the other thing I was going to mention that I feel like might be the most well-done aspect of this movie, even it's hard to say because the animation's so good. But the music. The music is such an integral part to the story, and that's really important when you're dealing with Miles.
yeah.
Like, because Miles' music is so important in his life, so it should be a
Right.
big part of this movie that they're making. Daniel Pemberton did the music, and I want to give him a shout out because this music is so good. I mean, Sunflower by Post Malone is iconic to this movie.
I
I
think
can't listen
they,
to it and not think of
I
it.
think they, I heard this somewhere. I don't know if it's 100% true, but I'm pretty sure they kind of animated or at least started animating that scene in the opening when he's listening to Sunflower without yet hearing what that song is.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it seems so in tune with the emotion
Yeah.
or the feeling of that morning. Just like it really is a vibe. Like the whole thing.
I
What
really like how they're animating Miles at a different frame rate than what they're animating Spider-Man, Peter Parker, so he's going at 24 frames a second and Miles is going at 12.
makes him look Spider-Man look
So
smoother?
yeah, it makes Miles look a little glitchy, and like he kind of pauses a little bit more like in the animation than Spider-Man does. And then towards the end of the film, when Miles is kind of getting the swing of things, then then he is animated at 24 frames per second as well, which I thought was such a cool detail, and it's a lot. It's probably something that you don't catch when you're first watching it until maybe like you watch like an interview or something and they tell you and you're like, oh, that's why that worked so well.
They thought that shows the level of detail they thought in because when you watch it, the characters move even in ways that are in tune with their personality.
Yeah.
And you could just have a guy walk down the street and be like, all right, that's how walking looks. We're gonna animate it like that.
Yeah.
But Miles moves like a character, like if he was a character actor, even though they're
Hmm.
animating him. Peter B. Parker moves like how Peter B. Parker moves. Like
Yeah.
the way they swing through the air is unique to their personalities and styles. It's awesome.
Yeah. It's really cool. Like, so Batman's your favorite, Spider-Man's my favorite.
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily grow up watching like Tobey Maguire and stuff. I mean, I did a little bit, but my first like memory of Spider-Man is playing the video games. Um,
I
so
played PS1,
yeah,
PS1 Spider-Man.
yeah, and I feel like a lot of the Spider-Mans haven't lived up to my expectation of this like Spider-Man, and this one blew it out of the park. Like, it's also cool that I went into it not really like expecting anything.
Yeah.
So it was cool to like just get really surprised by how well it was done. And Brooke, my wife, even really liked it, and she doesn't really even like movies, so that's how you know it's pretty good.
I'm literally like I just got chills because I was in my head going over the scene with Kingpin at the end where he says, how does he say it? He says, I'll never be without my family." And I was like, God, man, this movie's so it's emotional. It's so and
Yeah,
I think animated movies really shine. I love animated movies.
I've
And
liked them a lot more
yeah.
recently.
I'm a huge fan of animated movies, and I have other ones I want to talk about that aren't on this list because they're not the first thing I think of necessarily when I think of my top five favorite superhero movies, but they are amazing, amazing
Yeah.
movies.
All right, so I have two more. We've gone through all of your five. Um, the last two, if you had to guess, what do you think they are?
What both of them
Yeah,
are?
first ones that come to my mind. What do you think is on there? I don't think you guess it.
comic book movies. Can you tell me, are they both in the MCU?
They're not.
Or was one of them?
Nope.
Oh wow.
I
Um,
only have one from the MCU, and that's Captain America: Winter Soldier, and you had none
yeah,
from the
unless you count
MCU.
Into the Spider-Verse. But yeah, I guess that's not MCU.
No, it's
But we'll
just
see.
Marvel.
Um, so I'm gonna say Logan and Deadpool.
No, actually not. Um,
But I thought you were
I
a big fan
have
of Wolverine.
what?
I thought Logan was gonna be in yours 'cause I thought you really liked the
I
Wolverine.
am a big fan of Wolverine,
Oh, I know another one that would probably be a good one.
and
Tell me.
that was. This is the probably since we're talking about Wolverine. This was one that I like kind of went back and forth on because we came up with this topic what like a week ago.
Yeah,
So I I wrote out my first ones pretty quick.
camera's dark.
Son of a gun. Maybe I just didn't hit record. All right, that one's gone. Um, should I start over?
Nah.
No. Okay. So Wolverine is one of my favorite superheroes. So this was the one that I was like going back and forth on a lot, because we had a week to kind of come up with our five, and this spot I didn't know which one to put in because I could have picked any of them. Um, I really did enjoy Logan. I just watched it like a few weeks ago. It's not on there, and I really do enjoy Wolverine, just the movie Wolverine, fantastic, but it's not on there. I put X-Men: Days of Future
Future
Past.
past. Nice.
Um, I again kind of went off a feeling because I like the X-Men movies, but none of them have like, oh, that's a great movie, like they're fun to kind of put on in the background as you're doing other stuff. But this one I actually remember like, oh, that was actually pretty cool. How Logan goes back in time, and he's my favorite X-Men, so like the story was kind of with him as the forefront character, which he's not in all of the other X-Men sometimes. Um, but yeah, I love Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. I think he's fantastic, and I'm a big into fitness and working out, and just like his transformation from the first X-Men to like Wolverine, and then even in this one too, jacked, shredded. And I love that, like his full commitment to the character because that's a big part of the character.
When that movie first, I think is the first time they show him shirtless in that movie, he wakes up in bed with a woman
Yes.
and they shoot him and he's shirtless. And I think every man in the world watching that movie, their jaw just hit the floor. They were like, this guy is who I want to be. Like, why does he look like that?
Yeah.
He's
That's probably why I really liked him as a kid from X-Men Origins, Wolverine or whatever.
yeah.
Because of like, I mean, he's not his most ripped in that one, but he was still pretty
Yeah.
jacked and fit in that one, and I just thought it was so cool. And like at that time, I didn't know anything about comics or whatever, and I didn't realize how bad Deadpool was in that movie because I was younger.
I thought he was really cool.
I
And
thought it
watching, I was in the beginning, I was like, this guy's cool. He's
Yeah.
cutting all these bullets in half.
Yeah. But I thought it was fantastic. This one had a budget of 205 million, made 746 million, so pretty successful box office. It's got a rating of 7.9 out of 10 on IMDb. Audience or critic score on Rotten Tomatoes 90, and then audience scores of 91, so it's pretty well received.
I think best movie in the X-Men franchise. I think followed with X2 I would put right behind it, but I think that's the best, my favorite.
Yeah. I actually watched this past week because I was like, I need to make sure. I'm like,
Is this
I really want to watch this one again just to cement it. But I really do like Wolverine.
Quicksilver is very special, like aspect of that movie. Like that was a phenomenon when the Quicksilver's
I
first
wanted to
full
bring up
motion
that scene. Yeah,
Yeah.
that scene was so cool. You know, the combination of practical effects with the CGI. Like uh, again, it made it feel real because it wasn't just all CGI. Um,
And Evan Peters is such a good cast for that. I
Yeah.
mean, they hit the like. I know
Even
it.
when they go and like talk to him for the first time, and like he's just kind of
Zipping
zipping
around.
around the room, going from one thing to another. Because like it kind of made it seem like his attention span was so fast that like he did something and then he was done with it. You know,
And
because
yeah,
to him he just spent hours playing this game like ping pong or whatever that he's doing, or goes over play Pac-Man or whatever. Like he just to him spent hours doing that.
and you
But to
felt
us it's a
yeah,
matter of seconds.
and you felt his like insane amount of power in the fact that he would just use his powers in front of these people he doesn't know. Because what's anyone gonna do to him? He's
Right.
so fast.
Yeah.
You know, his power is incredibly strong.
Yeah.
Who would believe them, and who could do anything to this guy? He's just
It was
doesn't have a
cool.
care in the world.
I liked how they tied in the emotional aspect of when Wolverine saw Stryker for the first time. It kind of like wrecked him, and he almost like slipped out of his trance that Rogue had him in, to be able to travel back in time. You know, so like it was cool that like it affected him.
Yeah, Stryker's like his evil father, like
Yeah,
evil father
exactly.
figure. That's
Um,
also a cool element of X2, and so they
yeah.
play on it in their best ones, I think.
Okay. My last one, Kingsman Secret Service.
Ah, I never would have guessed
Oh,
that.
it was so good.
I didn't even consider Wanted.
um, this movie was so cool because like the style and of the fight scenes and stuff is like nothing else. You know, um, the church scene, crazy. You know, um, let's see what else.
It's like a top 10, top 20 action sequences of all time.
Yeah,
The church
and
scene is
and
really
it's like
well.
it's a one take, right?
I think it's a oneer, yeah.
Yeah,
I think if I'm
I'm
remembering
pretty
correctly,
sure it is.
I don't remember a visible cut in that
Yeah,
scene.
there's
I'm sure
not.
there's some invisible cuts though.
Oh, there is for sure, definitely. Whenever you see a oneer in a movie, it's not actually a oneer 90% of the time, which is cool that they're find a creative way to hide that stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And
So it's that is so well choreographed though.
yeah,
That scene, the amount like the
there's
work.
so much going on, but it doesn't lose your attention at all, or you know, like you're able to understand the story of that.
It makes me want an Oscar category for stunt actors.
Yeah, why don't they have one?
I don't believe they do. I feel like I could end up getting corrected on this,
They
but
might. I don't know if they do either, but they should.
they definitely should.
Um, this movie, I've actually read the comic too, and it's one of the few of the movies that we talked about that well, you had two of them, but the movie is like directly from the comic. Um, I think the movie is way better than the comic. The comic wasn't bad, um, but it was definitely more vulgar than it needed to be. The movie is still pretty violent and
Classic.
vulgar and stuff, but it's a lot better. And Samuel L. Jackson, great villain in the movie. Um,
It's a
yeah,
good twist on the villain. I mean, he has what, a lisp or a speech
yeah,
impediment.
hmm
This is an interesting thing to make your villain a little bit vulnerable with an
hmm
additional trait like that.
yeah. So to recap, my top five comic book movies: The Batman, Captain America: Winter Soldier, Spider-Man: Into the Spider-Verse, Kingsman: Secret Service, X-Men: Days of Future Past. With honorable mentions, Avengers: Infinity War. We haven't talked about that one at all.
Great movie.
I think that one's fantastic. It's probably one of my favorite movies in the MCU outside of Winter Soldier. The Dark Knight, Deadpool, and Logan are all up there for me.
So, my top five is The Dark Knight, V for Vendetta, Watchmen, The Batman, 2022, and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. My honorable mentions, the longer list. I put Hellboy. I like both the Hellboy movies. Guillermo del Toro is awesome director for Hellboy, and I think a perfect fit for the movie. I picked 300, another Zack Snyder movie. Such good action.
That's a comic.
Yeah,
I
by
didn't know
Frank Miller. Yeah.
that. Okay.
Avengers: Age of Ultron. I've heard that's an unpopular opinion.
Yeah, not a lot of people like that
I
movie.
love that movie. I love it so much. The Hulk versus the Hulkbuster fight, Hulk versus Veronica. There's so much cool stuff
I
in it.
actually really like that movie too.
Yeah,
I don't know why people don't like it.
I can see. I know. I understand some of the complaints. I like Aaron Taylor Johnson a lot, so I like his Quicksilver. But
hmm
I understand some of the complaints. But I think it's such an entertaining movie. Like to me, it's like the most rewatchable Avengers
It's
movie.
definitely a topic for another show.
Yeah, and then Iron Man started it all for the MCU. Deserves to notice.
hmm
Captain America: The Winter Soldier from your list.
Let's
X-Men:
go.
Days of Future Past from your list on my honorable mentions.
Oh,
And
another one for me. Civil War.
Deserves it. And
Yeah,
then I said Man of Steel. I think
I like Man of
Man
Steel
of Steel is
too.
really good.
I like that one a lot.
Um, so I have a quick list of animated movies. Let me know. Let me know which ones you've seen and which ones you haven't seen.
Okay,
So
I have a feeling I haven't seen most of them.
some of them are from the DCU, the DC animated universe. So Death of Superman um, might be my favorite. It's either that or Under the Red Hood or Batman Under the Red Hood. Are amazing animated movies. The Dark Knight Returns Part 1 and 2, The Killing Joke, and Flashpoint Paradox. Those, if that's your homework, if you haven't seen those movies, because those are
I'm
six
on it. I have a long list of movies I need to watch.
such good movies that and animated movies do such a good job of adapting comics.
Yeah.
My TV show mentions. I know these are three things that you love.
Dang, this is a movie podcast today, Andrew.
But listen, I had to. Look, how once you hear the three, you'd be like, how could we not give credit to these? This deserves its whole own episode. But Avatar: The Last Airbender,
Well, spoilers for that episode, and
Invincible, and Daredevil.
yeah, I agree with all those for sure.
Yeah, right. Like, how could you not? I
Yeah.
mean, the boys also I should put on there, but
Yeah.
those things are gonna have to be talked about now for a last segment.
All right,
I have
closing the show. What do you got?
I've got questions for you. I'm gonna put the spotlight on you. Aaron hasn't heard these
I'm
questions.
nervous. I'm not good with questions.
You ready?
No.
You
Yes.
have some time to think. Well, you'll go into the editing and just. Uh, so first question: what upcoming comic book project are you most excited for? What slated comic book project?
For a movie or for the comic?
I was thinking movies when I wrote the question. So
Um, I think I'm excited for the Invincible live action. It hasn't been talked about that much, but it was approved through Amazon. I really like the show. I really like the comics, so I'm interested. That's the first one that came to my mind.
okay. I mean that's a really good answer. I can't
Yeah.
wait to see what they do with that. I am gonna miss the presence of Stephen Yeun and J.K. Simmons
Yeah,
because I don't think there's any way they could put them in live
right.
action. But it'll be really cool. My answer would be right at this very moment, Black Adam. Partially because it's close, and partially because I think they have a really good trailer right now.
Yeah.
So that is what I'm most excited for. Um, then there's a lot of video game stuff too that I'm excited for. But what comic book title is most nostalgic to you? Think of your early years when you were a lad.
When I was a lad, well, I didn't start reading comic
No,
books.
no, okay. So movies.
Oh.
What comic book movie?
Probably Wolverine. Anything with him in it. I
I
mean, the Spider-Mans, yes, but like I didn't watch those until a lot later.
okay.
I played the video game first. So, as a common theme that will be presented in this is that I wasn't allowed to watch a lot of movies.
When you were younger.
So, I had to wait to watch a lot of movies until I was older. So, that's probably the Spider-Man the game was probably the first like Spider-Man that
Yeah.
he became my favorite. And I watched some of the shows,
Yeah.
the animated shows or whatever. But for like actual superhero movies, anything with Wolverine.
I, on the other hand, spent many moons, many hours sitting on the couch watching movies with my grandpa. And my favorite movie when I was a little kid was Spider-Man, the first one with directed by Sam Raimi,
Yeah.
with Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin. That is definitely my most nostalgic comic book movie.
Yeah.
Super nostalgic. It just makes me feel like a kid again. So, next question.
Okay.
What comic book movie was most influential to you?
Oh. Um.
And this is interesting because, I've seen you draw comics, so what
Yeah.
what is influential to you when you're thinking about writing a hero or when you're picking what you're gonna watch or write?
In terms of like the character that I've drawn the most would be the Joker from The Dark Knight. I don't know if he's like the most influential, but
Yeah.
I do like or I like his character in that movie and how they presented it. Um, what would yours be? And I want to see if I can. I want to keep thinking.
We kind of touched on it earlier is Batman for sure.
Mm.
Because I think the biggest part where I fell in love with Batman was playing Batman Arkham City when I was in middle school, and I just really love the way they craft the story in that game. And it's a big part of the Batman character in that game, and in general, is like Batman fighting to not kill. And basically, I like the idea of somebody who wants to help people so bad, and there's this easy way he could solve his problems, but he's, in a way, so stubborn and so strongly guided by this moral code that he would rather make his life 10,000 times harder than break his one rule. And I just think that is a really strong force of will. It's super interesting aspect of the character, I think. Can't be broken.
Yeah. All right. I think that's a wrap for our very first episode of Backseat Directing. I think it went great. And we're going to post these every Monday, right?
Yep.
Every Monday on wherever you get your podcasts, podcast app, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts.
Yeah, just
post it on YouTube. We're going to have clips and stuff on TikTok, so follow us on there, and Instagram. Again, every Monday. We're going to try to also have a smaller show on Thursdays as well. So again, this is Backseat Directing. I'm Aaron.
I'm Andrew. If you want or if you don't want, like, subscribe, follow, comment. We will love to see any comments, and hopefully we can engage with you guys out there. Thanks for listening or watching on whatever platform. Have a good one.
See you next time.